Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Smith of the Black VTF here, T3 Live with this week's market wrap up. And Jeepers Creepers, we still got a creeper. So here's the daily spy and creep, 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 creep. Slight higher high, and then yesterday's it's the end of the world. We're all going to crash again. And well, no, we didn't. So generally within the major uptrend here, what you're looking at if you look at the weekly, here we talking about broadening formations, and you're going to see this right on the weekly. Higher high, lower low, higher high, lower low, and now we went out and took these out. Now, people are like, it didn't hit the line. What it did is take out these highs. And so, have we completed this pattern to a certain extent? Yes. Can we go higher? Sure. We're seeing divergences within not only the sectors, but now the major broader averages. So, one of the things that's important to look at here is we haven't made a lower low in 10 weeks. So, even if we do take out the lows next week, not the end of the world. You can see here the gradual trend on the weekly would still be down into here about 205, and that would seem like a lot of pain, but it would still be within this general uptrend here. But if you take a look at QQQ, a little bit of a different story here. Weekly here, not quite an inside week goes up there. It was an outside week. Took it out slightly higher. We didn't take out last week's lows, but we did come in, and you can see this 3-week consolidation here, and a lot of earnings coming out here. So that they could have something to do with that. And then if you go to small cappers, go out on the highs of the week, and still trying to drive, and nowhere near the highs here up into here. And this is a really interesting pattern. I'm going to get back to that because it's stuff like this. If we're really going to go to the moon, this is the type of chart pattern that could potentially propel us. But there's a lot to do before then. If we go to Dow Jones Diamonds, you can see that similar stuff here. Higher high, lower low. That's in the monthly. If we go to the weekly, here, took it out, higher highs, lower lows here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and now we take that out. So we see a little bit of a divergence there, and what's important to be able to do is gauge that during the day, and we're able to do that during the day. So if you look at the SPY here, 60-minute chart. Remember my 60s, if you try and pull this up on your chart, my 60s change on the bottom of the hour. And so if you say, hey, it doesn't look like mine, that's why. And ideally, you want 60-minute charts to update on the bottom of the hour because we open on the bottom of the hour. You've got the European close on the bottom of the hour. A lot of important things happen at the bottom of the hour. And the last half an hour really is irrelevant because that's the close, and that's just closing print. So if you take a look at this and you hear me talking about a reversal strat, and this is what it looks like. Down, inside 60, takes the 60 down slightly but doesn't fall apart, which means this was an exhaustion of the selling. If it was really going to get hit, it would have taken that out and continued. That's not what happened. So when it comes back up in here, people can stay short against this, against this, against this. Wrong, wrong, and wrong, and boom. And QQQ here does it as well. And so oftentimes people say, well, does that mean buy SPY and QQQ? No. I mean, obviously it worked, and you can do it on Friday. You can get some cheap options and play it like that, and obviously it can work. But ideally, you want something that would have a higher probability setup. And so if you looked at the small caps at that time, here you can see the small caps inside 60, and what that tells me is that they were too strong to even attempt to try and make a lower low. So when the other broader average turned around, that's where I'm going to be looking. And so just like when you're looking at any relative performance, that's ideally what you want to look. A lot of guys try and pick the bottom of stuff, and ideally when the market comes from the lows and starts going to the highs, you're going to be looking at stuff on the highs because there's no reason to believe those are going to go down when the market turns around. And so that was a nice relative performance play, and especially if you can go like TNA, and you can get some options here, right, because it's on Friday, nice and cheap, stuff like that. If we take a look at the TLT bonds last weekend, we looked at the bonds and said inside week for the bonds, and what do you know, inside week and down, nice play for the bonds there. And when people were looking for the market to roll over, I'm like, well, the bonds are weak, and if you look at the VIX, and the SVXY was inside week and up, so there wasn't a lot of evidence that any real fear was coming in. And then as we get into earnings and to Google, oh no, it's the end of the world. It's like, hold on. I mean, one of the things I've been pointing out about the Google is if you look at, Alphabet, if you look at this monthly chart, one of the things I was going to have a real tough time doing, and I'll shrink that down so you can see it even better, a real tough time doing is taking out this outside month. That's important to know because You can see this slight higher highs, slight lower lows. How do you get out of this? And so one of the most important things is, how do we define trend? You can define trend by making higher highs or lower lows. And if you take it on a monthly basis, it's not doing that. It went inside month. All right, fair enough, formed the equilibrium, took it to the upside, but it had earnings coming out in front of that and was nowhere near that or that. Obviously, Google can move a lot, and it seems like a big move today, but in general, all it does is go right back into the middle of the range. So if we take a look at that weekly here, now it's an outside week and all this stuff here. Just chop them up, chop them up, chop them up, chop them up. Now you got to deal with this. How do you get outside of this? And then you got to take outside that big stuff. So a bit of a mess there, but can't say you weren't warned. If you go to Facebook, still inside month as well, not trending. And so when you have that, you're going to see this kind of stuff like this. I'll get that chart a little bit better, and so I like to define things. And so when people say things are choppy or whippy, I'm getting whipsawed. What you want to do is you want to look at a longer term time frame, because most likely it's inside, and what that means is it's consolidating. It's not doing anything, and so it has a likelihood. Now you can have these trends within it, and I'm not saying that, but in general things can turn on a dime when you see that. And so if you see something like this, and I talk about this fairly often. If you read a book, they'll tell you that it's got a gap to the exact lows or whatever. But a kicking pattern is something that you want to know about. And what that means is when you have a long green or red bar that then gaps towards the other side and takes it out, you want to know about that. So on this day in Facebook, you can see this straight up. Tough for anybody to stay short in there. But if you're long, you can easily stay long. But then if it gaps down here, and you've taken out a bunch of the shorts, then all these guys are scrambling to get out. So for a good portion of the day, you can expect something like that. So if you look at Netflix weekly, granted it happened on a gap in most of that day, but you can see how it could barely recover. But if you look at this weekly, oh, they got them good here, right? Just straight up and be like, I can stay short in front of the earnings. Really? Can you? Can you? Can you? No, I can't do it. Okay. Boom. Earnings come out. Everybody can stay long, or many people can stay long because they've been doing it from here and here. No big deal. But then once things start to retreat, you've taken a lot of the shorts out, and that leaves it open to do something like that. So obviously we want to look for something like that. Also got a lot of questions about Tesla, and so I want to just address that before we get further. And one of the problems with the Tesla is, once again, when you're still inside this bar here. The last 2 weeks we've been inside this bar, and then it really dries up. So we did have this inside week. It's still basically a doji on the month. And so when you have a strong month like we've had, ideally we want to trade things that are up a lot or down a lot, because that shows us they're on the move. Tesla's in this giant range here, and then on this inside week here, it breaks it to the downside, but it doesn't take this week out. All right, so at that point, that's what it needed to do. It's still within this uptrend, but you can expect these type of reversals when it's still in there. If you go to the daily, it really dried up. And another thing that's important is when you have to squint to see a pattern, oftentimes that it's going to need to expand a little bit. It's not going to go clean breakout, although sometimes it does. But here, this is two inside days. All right, 2 inside days, and then today it tried to break it to the downside, and then goes reversal strat back up. And you can see that when it's in a tight pattern like this, tight broadening formation here. They've tried these lows, they've tried these highs, and they're stuck in here. Right, we got to get out of this, and then you got to take a shot at that or that. So the good thing about it is that you do set up a reversal strat weekly, because it took an inside week to the downside, and now if it takes it out, you can take this high, and then you'd have to take a shot at this high. But you want to be aware of that. But just pointing that out, I've got a lot of questions on that. So other thing we saw this week was finally XLU rev strat week to the downside, and when you take this out here, you're going to see that broadening formation becomes support, and XLP gets hit, and triangle becomes support. So the question is, are institutions dumping this to chase risk? Saying, is it finally time to get, now it's not going to be a range bound year, looking to really go higher? Or are we going to start to soften up, and then they come running back in there? No, we're sorry, we want it. Well, what we're seeing is a lot of rotation, and this rotation has been continually to walk us up. But now we're challenged because the Qs are in a range. All right, we want to see if these small cappers continue, and if so, we saw here in the Qs, We've got earnings in Facebook and some other things. We will know about that. Semiconductors here for the Qs, still within these lower highs here on the SMH, and we want to see if we can take these. Are we going? A lot of the bear case has been lower highs, and that's what you're seeing here. However, if we start taking this stuff out, measured move, up, sideways, measured move, that would certainly help. If we take a look at IBB, and talked about this last week, inside week to the upside, and you can see this every time. It's like down, up, fail, down, up, fail, down, up. Now, does this continue? Are we going to see this continue, or are we going to start to break these patterns of some of these underperforming sectors? And if so, as you've heard me talk about many times, people who just look at the SPY say, oh, it's overbought. I'm like, there's a lot of stocks in there and a lot of sectors you might want to look at. So if you look at IBB, is it going to take that? And I talked about last week some of those monthlies here that are still coming up month. We'll run out of month, but Celgene coming up off the inside month, BIIB there, nice inside month. And can we break these series? And that's what we want to know. Do we set up to do that? Because FAS here, you can see the very similar here. Nowhere near the highs, and you get the XLF here a little bit better, but are these underperforming sectors, are they going to get rotated into? Because each day, as we've seen the SPY and the Qs and start, I mean, here, if you look at the divergence just on the real tight stuff, and you'll see that here, SPY, it's like SPY goes bullish engulfing, Qs go bearish outside day to the downside, but generally just in a range doing nothing. But every day we've been seeing these little divergences, and up until this week, really, we've seen that continue to push us higher. Now the question is, we go into a range, and can some of that stuff pick up the slack? Because on a day like this today, we had crude oil, potentially USO go RevStrat downside daily off those highs, but you did have XLE hold up, you had XOP inside day. So even when the market had its worst moments today, you still had these energies strong, even though we were starting to lose a little bit of some of the commodity names. And you even had FAS stay inside day and XLF, so even at the worst, those things were still inside day, and we had breaks in the oils to the upside. So when I talk about this monthly pattern stuff that we want to keep an eye on, right, you're going to see that in FAS. You're going to see that in some of these oils like Concho here, right? And this is something that never really got hit. And so if oil continues to stabilize, stuff like that in FANG, this thing's still near the highs. Stuff in the Dow like CAT. Is there any hope for this? Because we've seen IBM completely come out of the ashes here, but still within this down pattern. Now, if this starts to break and they start making higher highs out of this, then we'll talk. And IBB, you've got Qualcomm, similar to that. And so, obviously, we've got a lot of earnings and stuff coming out next week. We want to pay attention to that, and as well as always looking at these inside weeks. And so, for the inside weeks, much like we saw the commodities run early in the year and throughout, the question is, were some of these fallen darlings, if you will, start to turn around? Twitter, inside week down here with earnings coming out. Triple D, inside week and coming way out of the ashes, good percentage gainer this year. GoPro, inside week. Are they really going to start rotating into all this kind of stuff? We want to see that Akamai here to a lesser extent. And then for some bigger stuff like Western Digital, still coming off the lows, an inside week. NXPI, we'll see how that helps the semis as an inside week. You got AMBA. And then underperforming, you got old burritos here. Going inside weeks, CMG. So another thing we can take a look at is gold, because we've got, when we talk about divergence, you've had Nugget come out of this here, have these big spiky days on the weeklies, but still putting in the higher lows here, and the J Nugget really sticking it to them. But you've had gold just sitting here. Oops. Gold just sitting here in this range. So the question is, how does this resolve? Because they've run these miners quite a bit with gold still in a consolidation. So the question is, are they leading the metal here, Or is gold going to break their hearts and come back down into here? And if so, then we certainly would pay attention to the demise of some of these gold names. And or if this starts going measured move to the upside, perhaps you ain't seen nothing yet. So for next week, certainly I'm just going to stay on the earnings. We're also finishing off the month, so we'll be getting ready for new monthly charts. So far, so good. Like I said, we're up against a little resistance on that SPY. But when you look at the sectors, we want to continue to see what does the rotation look like. They jump ship a little bit so far on the XLV and the XLU and the XLP. The question is, does the rotation continue to come into the banks? Does IBB help the Qs get out of that range into the small cappers keep rallying? So that's going to do it for this week. I'm Rob Smith of the In the Black VTF here, T3 Live with this week's market wrap up.